Concentration camps mark one of the darkest epochs in human history. Their barbarity is only matched by a soulless orchestration of mass factory execution. Sachsenhausen was host to this and other atrocities too sick for imagination. Welcome to Bizarre History. Today we look at Joachim Mrugowsky, a Nazi doctor brought to rare justice. Joachim Mrugowsky had a simple, straightforward beginning to his life. He was born in 1905 to a Polish family in Rathenow. While his father lost his life in World War I, Joachim was still afforded the privilege of education and finishing his school-leaving exams in 1923 to go on to further education. Studying at the University of Halle, Mrugowsky acquired a doctorate in medicine and natural sciences in 1931. His professional climb was only just finding its feet. For the next 2 years, he interned at the university and was made an assistant for the faculty's Hygiene Institute. Come the late 1930s, Mrugowsky was studying for his habilitation at the University of Berlin, and in the coming years was made an associate professor. Ultimately, though, Joachim Mrugowsky's medical study and background were to be weaponized and used for some of the direst war crimes in World War II history. Mirroring a professional rise was a climb through the ranks of the budding National Socialist Party of the 1930s Germany. Around the time Joachim Mrugowsky was studying for his medical board exams, he became a leader of a local chapter of the Student Nazi Association. This didn't satisfy Mrugowsky, as within the same year he joined the NSDAP and the SS. In the mid-30s, he was a member of the security service in Halle where he studied. By 1934, he was made a second lieutenant in the SS. As the Nazis made their charge across Western Europe, Mrugowsky was given the role of the physician to troops in an SS division known as the WWII. The Sachsenhausen concentration camp was in commission from 1936. It's understood that Mrugowsky was appointed chief hygienist, and his role in the camp was overlooking and committing medical experiments he'd be put to trial for. Situated in Oranienburg, Germany, Sachsenhausen was a concentration camp in operation from 1936 until 1945. It took further operation and use by the Soviets under the NKVD after World War II. It's believed to be the site of 100,000 lives lost, and Sachsenhausen stands as a sick starting point for the rest of the Nazi camps to come. Sachsenhausen is understood to have trailed and started gas vans and killings of multiple inmates by gas before it began in Auschwitz in 1941. Along with forced labor, including the counterfeiting of British and American currency, subcamps, and a gas chamber, there was also a medical facility. It's at this facility that Joachim Mrugowsky left a fatal and haunting mark. Medical experiments were a huge strand of Nazi ideology that furthered their obsession with racial purity and genetics. Part of Mrugowsky's rise through the ranks of medical science would have been the extra funding afforded to the field by the Nazi Party. It's understood that at least 7,000 people were subject to medical experimentation in concentration camps. These experiments were irrespective of the subject's will, the subhuman conditions they were kept under, or any form of consent. Many of these experiments were deadly. Most were incredibly painful. Among others, Sachsenhausen was a camp particularly used for the experimentation of test drugs and their treatments. This was to serve the German military personnel out in the field. At Sachsenhausen, inmates were subject to compounds that were being tested to immunize for deadly and contagious diseases. Inmates were trailed for their immunization against tuberculosis, typhus, yellow fever, malaria, and hepatitis. Yet the cruelty didn't end there. There are also accounts of inmates under Mrugowsky's watch being subject to mustard gas and phosgene, not intended to murder them but as to test subjects for antibodies. Much of this testing at Sachsenhausen was targeted against specific identities. The Nazis in their genealogical crusade wished to see how different races would withstand different diseases and their strands. Mrugowsky was not a mere head of the totem pole of the experiments at Sachsenhausen. Records contend he led an experiment in which prisoners were shot with poison-laced ammunition. In cold medical terms, Mrugowsky describes watching 3 of the shot prisoners dying pained deaths. His record tells of him watching them vomiting, attempting to vomit, suffering seizures, and dying barely 2 hours after the fatal wounds. The very first trial of the Nuremberg proceedings was against the Nazi medical professionals. The opening declaration from the Chief of Council held the view Mrugowsky and his kind would be held in the eyes of the world murderers, torturers, using medical science as a cover to commit atrocities. In trials that went on for approaching 140 days, there was testimony from 85 witnesses, as well as hundreds and hundreds of submitted documents. 23 German medical administrators and physicians were tried. 16 of them were found guilty, and 7 of them were given the death sentence. This included Joachim Mrugowsky, rightfully charged for crimes against humanity and war crimes. He was hung to death on the 2nd of June, 1948. While the execution of Mrugowsky and 6 others stands as a rightful passage of justice, they were 7 of 23 brought to trial. As the Cold War would show, as well as Nazi colonies found in Argentina after the war, many leading Nazis went on to have careers long after the Second World War was over. Conversely, in the wake of the Nuremberg trials, the Nuremberg Code was born. This was taken on reflection of all testimony and evidence of the camp's medical atrocities revealed in the proceedings. The code produced reflected learning that any research of the medical kind would be rooted and required standards, and perhaps most importantly, informed consent. If you want more of history's most destructive and depraved, their crimes and comeuppance, hit like and subscribe to the channel. From us at Bizarre History, thank you for watching. See you next time.